You know, sometimes it ain't the big things that bring the past rushing back. No, sir. Sometimes it's something as simple as the smell of cinnamon in the air, or the way the rain taps against the window when the house is real quiet. Just yesterday, I was sitting right here in this OL creaky rocker. Lord knows she's older than half the folks in this town, and I reached over to turn the knob on that dusty OL Lafayette radio, the same one I've had since Eisenhower was president. I didn't even mean to stop on that station, WSM 650 AM, but wouldn't you know it, the moment I heard those guitar strings twang and that soft, gravel-sweet voice come through the speaker, I dropped my teacup near clean off the table. That voice. Now, you young folks wouldn't understand, but back in my day, when a boy left town to chase music, he usually didn't come back. And the only way you'd know he was still breathing was if his song came spinning through that speaker on a Sunday night. That's what happened with Jimmy Harper. James Cole Harper, if you're being proper. But to me, he was just Jimmy. A soft-spoken boy with calloused hands and a guitar that was more scars than wood. He used to sing at church socials and county fairs. Oh, he had a voice that could hush a field full of crickets. I used to sit in the back pew and pray twice as long just to hear him one more minute. Land sakes alive, it feels like a dream now. Well, folks don't talk about it much, but hearts can whisper. And ours did, in glances, in soft little laughs, in the way he'd hand me the hymnal and let his finger brush mine. We never said the words out loud, not once. That just wasn't the way things were done back then. We didn't have texts and all that carry-on. We had Sunday evenings, front porches, and secrets in the air between two rocking chairs. But that day when his voice came through the radio for the first time, Lord have mercy, I thought my heart would leap clean out of my chest. I was 19, still wearing hand-sewn skirts and helping Mama hang the wash. I remember it plain as day. The kitchen smelled like cornbread, and my little brother was fussing with the screen door. Mama was stirring beans like nothing was happening. But me, I pulled the quilt right over my face, trying to hide the tears. 'Cause that voice, that was him. That was our church, our dances, our quiet walks under the cottonwood trees, all wrapped up in one lonely song. Now I know what you're thinking. Why tell the story now? Why open up what's been closed for so many years? I'll tell you what, it's funny how music has a way of pulling threads you thought were long tucked away. And lately, I've been feeling that tug more than ever. Maybe it's the quiet nights, or maybe it's just time. Time to tell the truth, not the kind you write in a diary and tuck in a drawer, but the kind you speak out loud so it don't disappear when you're gone. There's a reason I still turn that dial every night. A reason I still sit in the same chair, same house, same porch, waiting on a song. And maybe, just maybe, you'll understand by the end of this story. But first, let me take you back to that summer in 1954, when Jimmy sang to a town too small to hold him, and I loved him too quiet for him to know. Back in those days, life moved slower, much slower than it does now. I was just a young girl then, barely 19 in the summer of '54, but my memories reach even further back, to when I was just a child running barefoot through the fields of Tennessee. Our little town near Memphis was the kind of place where everyone knew your name, and the creak of your front porch swing was as familiar as the church bells on a Sunday morning. It was a quiet place, where the air always smelled like fresh earth and honeysuckle, and where neighbors would stop by just to share a glass of sweet tea and a story. I remember my mama would be in the kitchen all day, humming old gospel songs, while the sun cast long shadows through the lace curtains. We didn't have much, land sakes alive. We didn't have a pot to pee in most days, but we made do with what we had, and that was enough. I was raised to believe that kindness was the greatest gift anyone could give, and that folks always found their way back to those who mattered. You mark my words, Ruthie, my mama would say, Good people don't just disappear. I clung to those words like a lifeline, especially when things got hard. As a girl, I had simple dreams, dreams of warm summer nights filled with music, laughter, and love that felt as sweet as the peach trees blooming in our backyard. I wanted to be a teacher, you see, teaching the little ones to read and write so they could make a better life than I ever had. But more than anything, I longed for someone to hold my hand and walk beside me through this big, wide world. I was no spring chicken, but I was young and hopeful, ready to believe in the kind of love you read about in books or hear in the songs on the radio. Jimmy was just a few years older than me, a boy with a heart of gold. Bless his soul. We didn't say much, but the way he looked at me in church or how he'd brush my hand when handing over the Bible said more than words ever could. Those were the kind of quiet moments that stayed with you, tucked away like treasures. He was a dreamer, always strumming that old guitar, humming melodies that spoke of faraway places and bigger stages. And me? I was content with my small town, my family, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, those two worlds could find a way to meet. I didn't know then how much that summer would change me, how the sound of a voice, carried across the radio waves, could pull at the very threads of my heart. But even now, when I close my eyes and hear those old songs, I'm back there sitting on the porch swing, feeling the cool breeze against my skin, and dreaming of a love that was as real as the Tennessee stars shining above. It was a time of innocence and hope, a time when the future felt like a story waiting to be written. You young folks wouldn't understand it all. Not really. But I'll tell you this, that small town, those simple days, they shaped me in ways I'm still discovering. And no matter how many years pass, no matter where life takes me, a part of me will always belong to that place, to that time, and to the boy with the guitar who sang songs that made my heart ache in the best way. You know, sometimes life has a way of sneaking up on you when you least expect it. I remember that summer day like it was yesterday, even though it's been more than 70 years. The sun was just starting to dip behind the hills of Tennessee, casting that soft, golden light that makes everything look like a memory already. I was helping Mama tend to the garden out back, hands deep in the soil, when I saw him, Jimmy Harper, walking down the dusty road from his family's farm. There was something different about him that day. Maybe it was the way the breeze caught his hair, or the quiet confidence in his step. I couldn't say for sure, but I remember my heart skipped a beat. Land sakes alive, I never felt anything quite like it before. Now, you have to understand, I was a shy girl, always the one watching from the sidelines, quiet and careful. I had my dreams, sure, but I never thought for a moment someone like Jimmy would take notice of me. He was the kind of boy with a heart of gold, bless his soul, and a smile that could warm the coldest Tennessee winter. When he passed by, he tipped his hat and gave me a nod, but there was a spark in his eyes that told me this wasn't just a simple greeting. It was the start of something more. Mama was busy in the kitchen, whistling a tune I'd heard her hum 1,000 times, so I couldn't tell her about the way my hands trembled or how my cheeks burned red as a Georgia sunset. My daddy was out in the barn, and my little sister was playing with the neighbors' kids down the street. For a moment, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath with me. I didn't know why my heart was racing, why the butterflies were dancing inside my chest. I just knew something had changed, something big. That night, I lay awake on my bed, listening to the crickets singing their nighttime song. I kept thinking about Jimmy, his soft voice, the way his fingers moved over that worn-out guitar. I told myself I was just imagining things, that maybe he was just being polite. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was the one I'd been waiting for all my life. It was a quiet kind of love, the kind you don't shout about from the rooftops, but whisper to yourself when no one else is around. And even though I didn't know it then, that moment was the first thread in a tapestry that would change my life forever. The days after Jimmy started showing up at church socials and county fairs, always with that guitar slung over his shoulder and his song in his heart. People said he had a voice that could heal a broken soul, and I believed it. Every time he sang, it was like he was singing just for me, though I never said a word to him. I was too shy, too scared to let him see the storm of feelings churning inside. But oh, how I wanted him to know. That was just the way things were back then. We kept our feelings wrapped up tight, afraid that letting them loose might break us. Looking back now, I realized that day, that look, that nod, it was the beginning of a story that would fill my heart with both joy and heartbreak. I couldn't explain why my heart beat faster or why I felt like the whole world had tilted just a little bit on its axis. All I knew was that something beautiful was starting, and I was holding on tight even if I didn't know where the road would lead. And so, with Jimmy in my thoughts and that old guitar melody echoing in the background, I stepped into a summer of firsts, first glances, first touches, and first songs that made me believe in forever. Little did I know, that summer would mark the moment when everything I thought I knew about love and life would change forever. Well, honey, life's funny that way. Just when you think you've found a little piece of heaven on earth, something comes along to remind you that it ain't always gonna be easy. That summer with Jimmy, oh, it was full of sweet moments, sure enough, but soon enough, the clouds started to gather, and I could feel the weight pressing down on my young heart like a storm ready to break. You see, back then, folks in our little town had their own ideas about what a girl like me should be doing. Mama always said, "Ruthie, you're a Morgan, behave yourself, and keep your feet on the ground." And my daddy, well, he was a good man, but he didn't take kindly to talk about boys or dreams that didn't involve Maureen, a steady man from around here. Jimmy, with his songs and his wanderlust, he wasn't the kind of future they saw for me. "He's no good for you," Mama whispered one night when she thought I was asleep. A singer's life is full of heartache and empty promises. Lord have mercy, that stung worse than a summer bee. And it wasn't just Mama and Daddy. The neighbors, the church folk, even some of my closest friends, they all had their eyes on me, and their opinions piled up like bricks in my chest. "Why you keep chasing a boy who ain't even here most days?" they'd say. "You oughta be thinking 'bout settle down in, not dreamin' 'bout Nashville lights." It felt like I was caught between two worlds, the one I belonged to and the one my heart was pulling me toward. But the hardest part, the part one never told a soul about, was the fear inside me. Fear that maybe they were right. Maybe I was foolish for believing that Jimmy would come back to me. Maybe I was just another girl with a song in her heart that'd never be sung loud enough to be heard. Sometimes, I'd sit by that old radio, clutching my white handkerchief, and wonder if I was just fooling myself all along. Shame settled in like a thick fog, and I felt small, so very small in a world that seemed too big and too cold. There were nights I'd lie awake, listening to the crackle of the radio static and Jimmy's voice flowing through the speakers, and I'd feel a mix of hope and heartbreak. I wanted to shout to the heavens, "Come back to me, Jimmy," but all I could do was whisper it into the dark. And still, I kept that promise to myself, to be strong, to wait, to believe in what could be. But then, just when I thought I could hold on a little longer, word came that changed everything. Jimmy was leaving for Nashville to chase his dream, and though he promised to write, that promise was the only thing tethering me to hope. That letter, oh, that one letter I got, was like a lifeline in a stormy sea, but after that, silence. No letters, no calls, just the sound of his songs drifting in the night air. I didn't want to let go, but the town kept pressing me, Mama's words echoing louder every day. "You're better off without him," they'd say. But how do you forget a voice that's been singing to your soul? How do you let go of a love that's been folded into every song on that old radio? Back then, I was too scared to speak my pain aloud. I bottled it up, wore a brave face, and carried on. I didn't want to burden anyone, and truth be told, I was ashamed to admit how much I missed him. So I'd sit in that rocking chair, hands clutching that old handkerchief, quietly wondering if love was meant to hurt this much. Life's trials had arrived, and they were knocking hard at my door. But deep inside, beneath all that fear and doubt, a small spark of hope kept flickering. Maybe someday, somehow, Jimmy's song would bring him back home. Until then, I'd carry on with a heart full of longing and a spirit that refused to break. Land sakes alive, I can still see it all so clear, as if it were yesterday, though it's been decades. That day, oh, that day when time itself seemed to stop, and my whole world shifted on its axis. I remember sitting by the window, the sun just starting to set, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floorboards of our little home in Tennessee. I had just tuned in the radio, hoping to catch Jimmy's voice once again, that soft, familiar sound that had become the heartbeat of my days. But instead, what came through the speaker wasn't the song I longed for, it was silence. A silence that screamed louder than any melody. Then came the letter. Not one I hoped for, but one that broke my heart in a way words never should. It was from Jimmy's manager, saying that Jimmy had found someone else, someone in Nashville who could give him what I never could: fame, a life under bright lights, a world I'd only dreamed of. The words hit me like a freight train, knocking the breath right out of me. I felt my hands tremble as I clutched that letter, my vision blurring with tears I couldn't hold back no more. I hid my face, not wanting Mama or anyone to see the heartbreak spilling over. I remember thinking, Lord have mercy, how could he forget so quick? But deep down, I knew it wasn't about me. It was the dream he'd chased, the life that pulled him far from our little town for me. That realization, it cut deeper than any knife. My heart, once full of hope, now felt hollow and shattered, like a fragile vase dropped to the floor. I didn't know if I could pick up the pieces if I wanted to. For days, I sat in that old rocker, just rocking back and forth, listening to the static hum of the radio, waiting for a song that never came. I thought about all the moments we'd shared, the gentle touches, the silent glances, the promise of forever whispered between us in the quiet of a Sunday evening. And I wondered if it had all been just a dream, a beautiful story written in the shadows of what could have been. That was the day I learned how sharp goodbye could be. The day I realized love don't always come wrapped in ribbons and sweet songs, it sometimes leaves you with nothing but echoes. I felt lost, like a ship without a rudder, adrift in a sea of sorrow. But I also learned something else, that even in the darkest nights, there's a flicker of light that won't be snuffed out. I found that spark deep inside me, a quiet strength I didn't know I had. It wasn't easy. Oh, no, it never is. But I made a choice that day, a choice to keep living, to keep loving in my own way, even if it wasn't the story I dreamed of as a young girl. I carried Jimmy's songs in my heart like a secret treasure, a bittersweet reminder of what once was and what could never be. That heartbreak shaped me, taught me about loss and resilience, about the quiet power of holding on and knowing when to let go. So yes, that moment changed me. It broke me, but it also made me. And here I am, still sitting in that same chair, still tuning in that radio dial, still listening for a voice that never quite left me. Because sometimes, the hardest part of love is knowing when it's time to say goodbye, and the strongest part is finding the courage to do it with grace. Well, now, after that storm passed, things weren't quite the same anymore. I reckon life never is, after you lose something that's been so deep inside you for so long. The house felt quieter, the days stretched longer, and that old radio, well, it still sat on the table, but it didn't sing to me like it used to. The music was softer, or maybe it was just me. I was different then, like the girl who used to dream had slipped away somewhere, leaving behind a woman who knew what it meant to be broken, but still had to carry on. I spent many a day just sitting in this very chair, gazing out the window at the trees swaying in the Tennessee breeze, wondering what life was really all about. The nights were the hardest, when the house got dark and the world outside fell silent, and all that was left was the hum of my own thoughts. I'd clutch that worn handkerchief Jimmy once gave me, and sometimes I'd let the tears fall quietly. Not out of weakness, mind you, but because sometimes the soul just needs to cry to make room for something new. I'll be honest with you, there were moments when I questioned everything, my faith, my future, even my own worth. How could I still believe in love when the one I held closest to my heart was gone? How could I trust the world when it had taken away the one thing that made it feel full? Those were the nights when doubt crept in like a slow fog, making it hard to see past the pain. But time, as it does, kept on moving. And though my heart felt heavy, a little part of me started to learn how to breathe again. I found comfort in small things: the feel of the sun on my face, the smell of fresh bread baking in the oven, the sound of the wind whispering through the pines. I started teaching at the local school, sharing what little I knew with children who needed a bit of hope in their eyes. It was hard work, but it gave me purpose, a reason to wake up each morning and keep on going. The radio became more than just a machine to me. It was a connection to a world beyond this quiet town, a reminder that even in loss, life keeps playing its song. I'd sit and listen to those old country tunes, sometimes humming along softly, letting the melodies carry me to places I couldn't reach on my own. And in those moments, I realized that though Jimmy was gone from my days, his music and a part of him was still with me. I ain't the same girl I was back then, that's for sure. The dreams I held close have changed shape, grown softer, maybe even wiser. I've learned that sometimes life don't give you the story you want, but it always gives you a story worth telling. And though the silence sometimes feels heavy, it's also full of memories, sweet, bitter, and everything in between, that make me who I am today. So, if there's one thing I've come to understand after all these years, it's this: loss can leave a hollowness, sure, but it can also teach you how to fill that space with new kinds of love for family, for simple joys, and for the quiet strength inside you that keeps you moving forward, one day at a time. Now, life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. After all those long, quiet days filled with nothing but memories and a heart heavy with loss, something happened that stirred a little flicker of hope inside me. It wasn't grand or flashy, no sir. It was just a small moment, a gentle nudge from life saying, "Miss Ruthie, there's still more ahead for you." One afternoon, while I was shuffling through the town square, I came across a young mother struggling with her grocery bags. Her hands were full, and her little boy was tugging at her sleeve, fussing to get home before the sun went down. Without thinking twice, I stepped in to help carry in some of those heavy bags to her doorstep. Her eyes met mine with a smile so warm, I felt a warmth bloom right through my chest. That simple act, helping someone else, gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. You see, back in my day, we believed in the power of community, the idea that when one of us is lifted up, we all rise a little higher. That day, I realized that even though my own dreams had changed, there was still joy to be found in the small kindnesses, in the lives we touch without even knowing it. It gave me the strength to look beyond my own pain and find meaning in the world around me. Around that time, I also started spending more time at the church, not just sitting in the pews, but volunteering to teach the Sunday school children. Their laughter and curiosity filled my heart with a lightness I thought I'd lost forever. I saw in their eyes the same hope I once had, and it reminded me that life is always giving us chances to begin again, even when we think the story's been written and closed. Sometimes, Hope comes wrapped in the quiet moments, like watching the sun set over the hills or hearing the soft strum of a guitar playing down the street. It's in those times I felt Jimmy's spirit with me, not as a sorrowful memory, but as a gentle guide leading me forward. The music that once made my heart ache now brought me comfort and courage. And so, slowly but surely, I began to piece together a new life, one not defined by what I had lost, but by what I still had to give. I found joy in teaching, in helping neighbors, and in the simple pleasures of each day. The radio still played those old country songs, and while some brought a tear, others brought a smile, reminders that love, in all its forms, never truly fades. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the past would come crashing back like a wave, threatening to pull me under. But I held tight to that little spark of hope, letting it light the way through the darkness. And through that hope, I found a new kind of peace, a second chance at happiness that didn't look like what I'd imagined, but was just as sweet in its own way. You know, sometimes the hardest battles we fight aren't out loud for the whole world to see. They're the quiet wars waged deep inside our own hearts. For many years, I carried a heaviness that felt like it would crush me under its weight. I held onto the past so tight, like a precious keepsake, afraid to let it go because it was all I had left of Jimmy and the love we never fully shared. But as time passed, something inside me started to whisper that maybe holding on so tight wasn't what love was really about. I remember one evening, sitting in my favorite rocker by the window, watching the sun dip low over the Tennessee hills. In my hands was that old, faded photograph of Jimmy, him in his checkered shirt, his guitar slung over his shoulder, looking as hopeful and young as ever. For years, that picture was my anchor, my reminder of what might have been. But that day, I looked at it and felt something different. Not just sorrow or longing, but a soft, gentle peace. And with that peace came a choice to stop living in the shadow of what was lost and start living in the light of what still could be. I made myself a promise right then and there. I told myself, Ruthie, it's okay to let go. It's okay to forgive. You've been carrying this weight long enough. And with that promise, I set the photograph down on the windowsill and watched the light catch its edges like it was finally free. That simple act felt like a breath taken after holding it for too long, a release of a pain that had no place in the life I still had to live. I chose to live again, not with bitterness or regret, but with gratitude for the love I had known and the lessons it taught me. I chose to carry those memories not as chains, but as gentle reminders of the strength and courage buried deep inside. I chose to open my heart to my family, to my friends, and most importantly, to myself. Life didn't suddenly become perfect, no ma'am. There were still hard days, moments when the old ache stirred up and made me cry. But each time, I let the tears fall and then wiped them away with the same white handkerchief Jimmy once gave me, no longer a symbol of sorrow, but one of healing. I found that forgiveness, especially the kind you give yourself, can be the kindest song your heart ever sings. And so here I am, sitting in this very chair, listening to the crackle of that old Lafayette radio, feeling the warmth of a life lived with grace. I'm not the same girl I was all those years ago, and that's a beautiful thing. I'm a woman who has learned to embrace both joy and pain, who understands that love doesn't always look the way we imagine, but it lives on, quiet, steady, and true. I want you to know that it's never too late to choose peace, to choose forgiveness, to choose life. No matter what's in your past, no matter how heavy your heart may feel, you have the power to let go and live fully again. Because at the end of the day, that's all any of us can really do. You know, after all these years, sitting here in my rocker and watching the seasons change outside my window, I've come to understand a few things about love, life, and the ways we hold on to hope. It ain't always the kind of wisdom you find in books or hear preached from a pulpit. It's the kind that settles deep in your bones after you've lived through your share of heartaches and healing. And let me tell you, that kind of wisdom comes with a gentle, bittersweet taste, like a song that lingers long after the last snow fades. I used to think love was about holding on tight, about waiting for someone to come back, for that dream to come true. But life showed me something different. Love isn't always about keeping a flame burning for someone who's gone. Sometimes it's about learning to carry that flame inside yourself, even when the night feels the darkest. It's about letting go of what you can't change and making peace with the memories that made you who you are. Back then, I was waiting, oh, how I waited. Waited for Jimmy's voice to come through the radio, waited for a letter, waited for a sign that things would be different. And I'll be honest with you, that wait was painful. It kept me tethered to a past that couldn't be undone, and for a long time, I thought that was what love meant. But it wasn't. Not really. What I learned is this: sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to stop waiting. To stop looking for a door that won't open, or a song that's already been sung. Because life, my dear, is moving all the time, whether we're ready or not. And if we spend too long clinging to the past, we might just miss the beauty of what's right in front of us. I found that peace comes when you stop trying to rewrite the story and start accepting it as it is, with all its joy and all its sorrow. That's the truth that's carried me through these years. I'm grateful for every tear and every smile because they shaped me into the woman I am today. And I hope that truth can help someone else out there who's still caught in the waiting game. Maybe it's time for you to let go of that old song that plays in your heart. Maybe it's time to find your own melody, to live fully with courage and grace, even when the road is rough. I promise you, there's a kind of freedom in that choice that nothing else can give. So, my dear, as you listen to my story, I hope you take this to heart. Love is powerful, but it's not always about holding on. Sometimes, it's about the strength to move forward. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is to say goodbye, not with anger or regret, but with a gentle smile and an open heart. Because love, in all its forms, is worth carrying with you, whether it stays by your side or lives forever in a song. Well, now, here we are at the end of this little journey I've been sharing with you. I hope you felt a bit of the warmth and sorrow, the hope and heartache that's been a part of my life all these years. You know, sometimes I sit in this very chair and wonder about love, what it means, how it changes us, and whether it ever really goes away. I tell you, it's a question that's danced in my mind more times than I can count. I want to ask you something real gentle like, do you think true love should come back? Not just in memories or songs, but in some way that touches the here and now. That lingers soft and steady in the quiet moments when no one else is looking. Because, if I'm honest, sometimes I think Jimmy's voice still finds me through that old radio, singing to the part of me that's never quite let go. And sometimes, just sometimes, I wonder if he remembers me too. This story isn't just about a time long gone, it's about today and every day that comes after. It's about how the past shapes the present and how love, in its many forms, lives on in us. Whether it's the love we hold for someone who's no longer here, or the love we find in ourselves and the people around us, it's a light that never truly fades. I want you to carry that with you, that even when life brings heartache, there's a quiet strength in remembering, in forgiving, and in keeping your heart open. Because love's not always loud or flashy. Sometimes it's the softest whisper, the gentle echo that stays with us long after the song has ended. So, my dear friend, as you go about your day, think about the loves you've held, the losses you've faced, and the hope that still shines within you. And if you ever feel that quiet tug at your heart, know that you're not alone. We're all walking this path together, carrying our stories and our songs. Thank you for listening to mine.